When I asked for time off to care for my hospitalized mother, my supervisor rolled his eyes and said, "What's more important, your sick mom or your career? We all make choices." I stared at him in shock as my team looked away in silence. I quietly made my choice that night, filing a discrimination complaint that would rip open every ugly secret our department had been hiding for years. 2 years ago, my life split in two. Before that day, I was someone who kept my head down. Worked hard. Didn't complain. I thought that's how you survived in places like our county office: just do your job, avoid the drama, and don't make waves. I worked for the Cumberland County Department of Public Services in Fayetteville, North Carolina. My title was Program Analyst, which sounds fancy, but it basically meant I handled data reports, contracts, budgets, and helped keep the numbers from turning into disasters. Not glamorous, but steady. My supervisor, Bill Connolly, was one of those guys you instinctively disliked. He had this smug face like he was always chewing on a secret and thought you were too dumb to figure it out. He wore expensive loafers even though his salary barely justified them, and he constantly talked about how hard he worked while dumping his responsibilities on the rest of us. I'd dealt with him for years. Let it slide. Rolled my eyes. Made jokes behind his back with coworkers. But I never really pushed back. Never had a reason to. Then came the phone call. I was sitting in the office break room eating leftover spaghetti from a Tupperware when my phone rang. It was my mom's neighbor. She said she'd found my mother collapsed on the kitchen floor and the paramedics had taken her to Cape Fear Valley. My mom had a stroke. A bad one. They weren't sure if she was going to make it through the night. I left work immediately. Didn't ask. Didn't wait for permission. She made it through the night, but barely. Doctors said she'd need round-the-clock care for a while: physical therapy, speech rehab, the works. I was all she had. My dad passed years ago and I'm an only child. So 2 days later, I came back to work, waited until Bill was alone in his office, and knocked. He didn't even look up when I walked in. Just kept typing. I said, "Bill, I need to take some time off. My mom's recovering from a stroke. She needs care." Still typing. "I have the PTO. I can check in remotely if that helps. I just need to be with her right now." That's when he looked at me. Like I had just interrupted something far more important than a dying parent. He leaned back in his chair, tilted his head, and said it, "What's more important, your sick mom or your career? We all make choices." Just like that. No empathy. No concern. Not even curiosity. Like I'd asked to take a vacation to Cabo. Then he smirked and added, "You're not the only one with problems, you know. If I let everyone take time off when life gets tough, we'd have no one here. You're going to have to make a decision." I didn't say anything. I was so stunned I just stared at him. My ears were hot. My chest was tight. I turned around and walked out. As I passed the cubicles, I noticed something. Everyone had heard. Everyone was quiet. No one looked at me. Like I was radioactive. Something snapped in me that day. All the years I kept my head down? Wasted. I went back to my desk, packed up my stuff slowly, and said I'd work remotely the rest of the day. I drove back to the hospital, sat by my mom's side, and pulled out my laptop. That night, I started writing. At first, I just wanted to write the incident down, to remember it clearly for HR. But as I wrote, things started coming back to me. Incidents. Moments. Red flags I'd ignored. Like the time Bill gave his buddy Steve a bonus project worth an extra $4,000. A project I had actually completed but he put Steve's name on it. Or how 2 women in our office had quietly quit within a month of each other, both after getting called into private meetings with Bill. Rumor was, he'd made comments that made them uncomfortable. There was also the matter of expense reports. I'd helped process a few. One stood out, a 4-day training in Charlotte that involved 5-star hotels and $300 dinners. Bill and Steve went together. They never brought back any materials, and the training didn't appear on any official vendor calendar. So I started gathering. I pulled up old emails. Screenshots of calendar invites. I had a copy of the budget report that showed the training was funded from a completely unrelated emergency preparedness grant. I remembered I'd once walked into Bill's office unannounced and caught him FaceTiming someone while buttoning up his shirt. The person on the screen was young. Much younger. That intern we had 3 years ago, Danielle. After she left suddenly, he told everyone she couldn't handle the stress. I also had Slack logs, internal chat messages, and photo evidence of inappropriate jokes he made during one of our team building outings at a bowling alley, jokes about another coworker's weight, and a racial comment he tried to play off as just being honest. So I compiled it. I wrote a 17-page report. Included links, photos, timelines, and quotes. I filed it through the official HR system under a formal complaint. Then I blind copied it to the county ethics board. And I wasn't done. I sent an anonymous email to a local WRAL reporter who had done a piece 6 months back on corruption in a nearby town school board. I figured she'd know what to do with this. And then, I waited. 2 weeks passed after I submitted the complaint. Nothing happened. No calls. No meetings. Not even a confirmation email. I checked my work email daily, even though I was still working remotely from the hospital. My mom was slowly improving. She could talk a little, though her speech was slurred, and she'd squeeze my hand sometimes when I sat next to her. That gave me just enough strength to keep pushing. But at work? Radio silence. Until the third Monday. I logged into our internal portal that morning and noticed something strange. I no longer had access to certain shared folders. These were files I used daily. Budget documents. Payroll records. My permissions had been changed. An hour later, I got a message from IT saying my access was being restructured. No explanation. Just a canned response. I didn't panic yet. I figured maybe HR was investigating and wanted to limit who could view certain files. But then I got a message from a coworker, Tanya. She wrote, "Hey, just a heads up, Bill had a closed-door meeting with Denise from HR this morning. Came out looking pissed. Then he met with the director for like an hour. Something's up." I knew then, they'd seen my complaint. Or at least they were aware of it. But they weren't handling it by the book. They were circling the wagons. That same week, I started getting left out of team calls. A recurring Wednesday budget meeting? Cancelled on my calendar. A staff-wide email about a new project I was assigned to? Everyone got it but me. I didn't say anything. I just took screenshots. Logged everything. Dates, times, names. Then Tanya messaged me again. "You didn't hear this from me, but Bill's telling people you're mentally unstable. That you're going through a family breakdown and might need medical leave. He said you're not fit to handle sensitive tasks right now." I stared at my screen for a long time after that. That's when I knew, this wasn't just about covering their tracks. Bill was trying to ruin me. He wanted me discredited before anyone even looked at my complaint. If he could make me seem emotional, unreliable, fragile, then nothing I said would matter. It'd be brushed off as personal drama. But I didn't fold. I doubled down. I contacted the WRAL reporter again. This time, I wasn't anonymous. I used my name. Her name was Karen Tran. She replied within a day. We set up a Zoom call. She was sharp, serious, and asked all the right questions. She didn't flinch when I told her about the intern, or the fake trainings, or the retaliation. She said she'd heard rumors about Bill before, but no one had ever come forward. I sent her my files. Everything. And then, things started moving. A week after that Zoom call, WRAL published a teaser on their site. Whistleblower raises allegations of corruption and misconduct inside Cumberland County government. Full report coming this Sunday at 11. That Friday, I was called into an HR Zoom meeting. 3 people were there: Denise from HR, the county's legal rep, and someone new. A woman named Alexis Rodriguez. She introduced herself as a third-party investigator retained for neutrality. They said they were reviewing a wide range of concerns and wanted to ask me questions. I stayed calm. Gave short, honest answers. Let them talk. Halfway through the meeting, Denise said something that almost made me laugh. "We want to assure you this isn't a witch hunt. We're only interested in the truth." But I could tell they weren't just fact-finding. They were nervous. Especially when I mentioned that I had already shared my files with outside media and legal counsel. Dead silence for a full 5 seconds after that. I ended the call politely. Thanked them. Then turned off my camera and just sat there. My hands were shaking, not because I was scared. Because I finally had some power. That Sunday night, WRAL dropped the bomb. Karen Tran's full report aired at 11 p.m. sharp. It was brutal. She didn't name me, but she cited an internal whistleblower. She named Bill Connolly directly. She included screenshots of budget reports, photos from training trips that showed him on a golf course with Steve, drinking whiskey. She even tracked down Danielle, the former intern. Danielle spoke on camera, her face blurred, and described how Bill had pressured her into inappropriate situations, and that she left because she felt cornered and ashamed. The story also revealed that at least $38,000 in taxpayer funds had been misused on trips, bonuses, and fake expenses over the last 2 years. Several employees had been given raises without HR documentation. One of them was Steve, who apparently didn't even show up to work half the time. Social media lit up. The county Facebook page was flooded with comments. People were furious. By Monday morning, everything had changed. But not in the way I expected. Monday morning, I logged into my email expecting chaos. I was right, but not the kind I'd imagined. At 9:17 a.m., we all got a county-wide email from the Director of Public Services. It was short: effective immediately, Bill Connolly has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal investigation. Please direct any supervisory issues to Acting Supervisor Steve Harlan until further notice. Steve. Of course. They didn't bring in someone neutral. They didn't tap HR. They put his best friend in charge. The same Steve who showed up drunk at 2 different office events. The same Steve who signed off on half the shady travel expenses. They handed the keys to the guy sitting in the passenger seat when all of this happened. That same morning, I got an email from Denise in HR. She wanted to remind me that the investigation was confidential, and any public discussions, including social media commentary or leaks to news outlets, could result in disciplinary action. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Karen at WRAL instead. Then came the text message. From a number I didn't recognize: "You think this is over? You don't know who you're messing with." I froze. I stared at it for a full minute before taking a screenshot and sending it to both the HR team and the ethics board. I also filed a police report, just to cover myself. That same afternoon, Tanya messaged me again. She said someone had gone through my desk. Papers had been moved. A personal note from my mom, one she wrote before the stroke, was missing. Nothing else taken. Just that. That's when I knew. They weren't just scared. They were scrambling. Then, Tuesday morning came with the first real twist. A second WRAL story dropped. But this time, it wasn't about Bill. It was about Director Lawrence Gates. Our department head. The man who wrote the email announcing Bill's suspension. Turns out, he'd been named in a quiet internal investigation 2 years earlier, one that was buried. He'd also approved every one of Bill's shady budget requests. signed off on the raises. He was the one who hired Steve, despite zero relevant qualifications. And he was the one who sat in on Danielle's exit interview, the one that was accidentally lost and never filed. Karen's story linked Gates to a consulting firm that had been awarded 3 no-bid contracts over the last year, all for services that never seemed to materialize. That firm? Registered under his cousin's name in another state. By noon, he was trending locally. And by 4 p.m., he had resigned. Not suspended. Not investigated. Resigned. With a severance. I felt sick. Not just because he was walking away clean, but because I realized how deep this really went. I thought I'd been fighting one corrupt man. Turns out, I'd stepped into a whole web of them. Then, something even stranger happened. 2 people I'd barely spoken to at work, both longtime employees, messaged me privately. One said, "I've been waiting years for someone to do what you did. I'll back you up if they try to come after you." The other one? "Just so you know, I have copies of travel vouchers Bill filed under my name. I didn't go on those trips. Let me know if you want them." It hit me then, they weren't just hiding their secrets. They'd been using people. Dragging innocent coworkers into their fraud. Silencing others with fear. This wasn't a workplace. It was a protection racket with office cubicles. And now it was unraveling. But the pressure on me was only getting worse. That Friday, I received a letter in the mail from the county legal office. It was dense, full of legal jargon, but the message was clear: they were investigating me now, too. They were claiming that by leaking information to the press, I'd violated confidentiality agreements and jeopardized ongoing internal procedures. I'd expected retaliation. I didn't think they'd go this far. But they underestimated one thing: I'd been documenting everything. Every conversation. Every threat. Every email. Every shift in my access. Every missing item from my desk. I had a digital trail that went back years. And I wasn't going to let them scare me into silence. The final twist came a few days later, and it changed everything. I was going through an old flash drive from my early years in the department. I found a folder labeled archive_miscellaneous. I almost skipped it, but something told me to look. Inside were files from a shared drive we used to have before we switched systems. Buried deep in subfolders was an audio recording. The file name? Gates_BC_1on1_mtg.mp3. My heart started pounding. I clicked play. The recording was from 3 years ago. Someone had left their phone on during a closed-door meeting. You could hear 2 voices, Gates and Bill. At first, just boring budget stuff. But then, Bill said something that made me sit straight up. "We'll just shift it through Steve's code and run it through the consultant line again. It'll bounce clean. And if anyone asks, we say it was for disaster prep. Who's gonna dig into that?" Gates replied, laughing, "That's what I like about you, Bill. You think like a survivor." My hand shook as I copied the file. This wasn't just inappropriate. It was proof of fraud. Taxpayer fraud. Misuse of federal disaster funds. And it was timestamped. Clear voices. No edits. They had no idea this still existed. I sent it, carefully, to Karen, the ethics board, and my lawyer. Now I had them pinned. Everything changed after I handed over the audio recording. Karen at WRAL called me the same night I sent it. She sounded different, sharper, more serious. She said, this is gold. It's a smoking gun." By morning, the county's legal office had already gotten word. I know because I got a call at 8:12 a.m. from a number I didn't recognize. It was Alexis Rodriguez, the third-party investigator from before. Her voice was calm but tense. "I need to speak with you immediately. In person." I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop on Ramsey Street. She showed up with a man from the state auditor's office. Not local. Not county. State. They told me flat out, my recording triggered a multi-agency investigation. Not just into Bill or Gates, but the entire department. They were pulling travel records, grant applications, vendor contracts, everything. Apparently, the misuse of disaster funds wasn't just unethical. It was federal fraud. FEMA money was involved. And I wasn't the only one with evidence anymore. The two co-workers who had messaged me? They gave sworn statements. Danielle, the intern, agreed to speak to investigators. One of the finance clerks turned over spreadsheets showing months of fake overtime payouts, to Steve. And now that people saw it was real, that heads were finally rolling, they weren't scared anymore. They were pissed. 2 weeks later, WRAL released its biggest report yet. Headline: Audio tape reveals county officials covered up fraud, misused federal funds, and silenced whistleblowers. FBI joins investigation. Yes. The FBI. By the end of that week, Bill Connolly was arrested and charged with fraud, misconduct in office, and obstruction. He was perp-walked out of his house on live television. Steve Harlan was fired and later charged as well. Turned out he'd been clocking overtime from a beach house in South Carolina. He hadn't worked a full week in over a year. Lawrence Gates, the former director, was also indicted. Federal charges: wire fraud, misappropriation of federal funds. His cousin, the fake vendor, flipped on him in exchange for leniency. Denise from HR resigned. No charges, but she'll never work in a government job again. Her role in covering up complaints was public record now. It was everything I'd hoped for. But it came at a cost. While all this was happening, I was placed on unpaid leave. Yes. You read that right. They said I violated protocol by leaking to the press. They were still trying to punish me. County policy gave them just enough wiggle room to suspend me during the investigation. I fought back, hard. My lawyer filed a retaliation claim. The ethics board issued a statement supporting me. WRAL ran a piece titled "The Whistleblower They Tried to Silence." Public pressure mounted. Angry calls flooded the county office. Even a local church group organized a protest outside the building holding signs that said "Justice for the Whistleblower" and "Stop Protecting Corruption." 2 months later, the county caved. Not only was I reinstated, I was promoted. A new oversight position created just for me, Director of Compliance and Ethics. Full authority to audit any department I wanted. Full access. 6-figure salary. Clean title. They tried to bury me. I came back as the one holding the shovel. But I didn't stop there. With the help of my lawyer and a local advocacy group, I pushed for new whistleblower protection policies across the entire county. Mandatory reporting procedures. Anonymous tip lines. No more lost complaints. No more backroom deals. We also got a state bill introduced, nicknamed Danielle's Law, to protect interns from workplace exploitation in all public agencies. It passed the following year. As for Bill, he took a plea deal. 5 years in federal prison. 2 years probation. He cried in court and told the judge he'd lost everything. His wife divorced him. His kids won't speak to him. He'll never hold a public job again. Steve got 18 months. Gates got 6 years. Danielle sued the county and won a massive settlement. Last I heard, she was starting a nonprofit to support young women in politics. And me? I stayed. Not because I needed the job, but because I wanted to make sure this never happened to anyone else. I walk through that building now and people look me in the eye. They nod. Some even thank me quietly in the elevator. And every time I pass the office that used to belong to Bill, I pause. I remember that moment. Him sitting there in his leather chair, asking me what was more important, my mom or my career. He made me choose. And because of that, I chose war. He never saw it coming. And I never looked back.